The Kremlin has issued a defiant response to the new shortened deadline from United States President Donald Trump, signaling its intention to continue its military operations in Ukraine regardless of the American ultimatum. The sharpened rhetoric from Washington, which drastically reduced an earlier 50-day timeline to make a mere 10 days, has been met with a mixture of calculated indifferences and outright dismissal from Moscow, pushing the already strained relations between the two global powers to a precarious new edge. As the deadline clock ticks with no signs of a Russian policy shift, the international community watches with bated breath, bracing for the economic and geopolitical shockwaves that President Trump's threatened sanctions and secondary tariffs could unleash. The initial 50-day deadline laid out by President Trump in July was intended as a bold stroke of diplomatic pressure, a clear message to Russian President Vladimir Putin that the United States was committed to ending the protracted conflict in Ukraine. The threat was unambiguous. If a ceasefire agreement was not reached within the specified time frame, the U.S. would impose crippling 100% secondary tariffs on countries conducting businesses with Russia. This move was part of a broader strategy by the Trump administration to assert itself as a global peacemaker, a role the president has often stated he views as a cornerstone of his legacy. However, as the initial weeks of the deadline passed with little to no discernible progress in diplomatic negotiations, a palpable sense of frustration grew within the White House. President Trump himself voiced this disappointment, lamenting what he described as disingenuous conversations with his Russian counterpart. He recounted phone calls with President Putin that he felt were positive, only to be followed by renewed missile attacks on Ukrainian cities, leading him to conclude that the talks was meaningless. This growing impatience culminated in a dramatic shortening of the ultimatum. During a trip to Europe, where he held meetings with British Prime Minister Keir Starmer, President Trump announced the new accelerated timeline of just 10 or 12 days. Speaking to reporters, he stated, "There is no reason in waiting. We just don't see any progress being made." The revised deadline, now set to expire around August 8th, was a clear escalation of pressure, a high-stake gamble designed to force Moscow's hand. The president made it plain that the consequence for non-compliance would be the imposition of tariffs and other unspecified sanctions. Moscow's public reaction to the initial 50-day ultimatum was one of outright rejection. Deputy Foreign Minister Sergei Ryabkov labeled the demand unacceptable, emphasizing that any attempts to impose ultimatums on Russia were futile. He reiterated Russia's state's readiness to negotiate, but insisted that the special military operations would continue until its objectives were met, a position he urged Washington and its allies to take with the utmost seriousness. Kremlin spokesman Dmitry Peskov described the announcement as quite serious and stated that time was needed to analyze the American position, leaving the door open for a direct comment from President Putin. Former Russian President Dmitry Medvedev, now the deputy head of Russia's Security Council, was more dismissive, branding the ultimatum as theatrical and declaring on social media that Russia didn't care. When President Trump drastically shortened the deadline, the Kremlin's official response remained consistent, though perhaps even more resolute. Peskov confirmed that Moscow had taken note of the new ultimatum, but unequivocally stated that the military campaign in Ukraine would not be halted. The special military operation continues, he told reporters during his daily press briefing. This sentiment was echoed in Russian state media, which largely downplayed the development, and on social media platforms, where the reaction was a blend of defiance and skepticism about whether the Trump administration would follow through on its threat. Andrei Gurolyov, a member of Russia's State Duma, characterized President Trump's announcement as a fresh statement with the same old pump, which no longer works. He asserted that Russia does not bet on Trump, just as we didn't bet on Biden. We bet on ourselves. This public posturing from Moscow suggests a deep-seated belief that President Trump's threats may lack the substantive backing to force a change in their strategic calculus. Anna Matvieva, a senior research fellow at King's College London, noted that Russian leaders respond very poorly to threats, viewing them as an attempt by a global daddy to dictate terms to unruly children. He believes the Kremlin likely finds President Trump's mounting frustration regrettable, but that it will not alter their actions on the battlefield, a point underscored by the Russian Ministry of Defense simultaneous claim of capturing new settlements in eastern Ukraine. The Trump administration, for its part, has been working to project an image of strength and resolve. The cabinet, filled with officials who align with the president's America First foreign policy, has been vocal in its support of a tougher line on Russia. Secretary of State Marco Rubio has repeatedly stated that while the war in Ukraine is a terrible thing, it is not our war. He has emphasized the administration's extensive efforts to bring the conflict to an end, framing the deadline as a necessary step to determine if a peaceful resolution is even possible in the near term. We are now reaching a point where we need to decide and determine whether this is even possible or not, Rubio stated, adding that the administration needs to know within a matter of days, not weeks, if a deal is doable. He has made it clear that if a diplomatic solution proves unattainable, the United States has other priorities to focus on and will not continue the endeavor for weeks and months on end. This position reflects a broader administration view that a military solution to the conflict is not viable for either side. Secretary of the Treasury Scott Bessent has been a key figure in articulating the economic dimensions of the administration's strategy. Bessent has been a sharp critic of the previous administration's approach, which he described as imposing egregiously weak sanctions on Russian energy. He has vowed that the Trump administration is prepared to go all in on sanctions to pressure Moscow into negotiations. Sanctions on Moscow will be used explicitly and aggressively for immediate maximum impact, Bessent declared, signaling a departure from what he characterized as the previous administration's concern about potential upward pressure on American energy prices. He has also publicly urged European allies to join the United States in imposing secondary tariffs on Russian oil should they be implemented. I urge our European allies who have talked a big game to follow us if we implement these secondary tariffs, Bessent said in an interview, highlighting the administration's desire for a united front. The Department of Defense, under the leadership of Secretary Peter Hegseth, has also been aligning its action with the president's tougher stance. While the administration has paused some weapons shipment to Ukraine pending a review of military spending, it has also approved hundreds of millions of dollars in other proposed weapon sales, including air defense systems and armored vehicles. This dual approach appears aimed at both conserving American resources and providing Ukraine with the means to defend itself. Point President Trump has emphasized, they have to be able to defend themselves, Trump said. Secretary Hegseth has underscored the importance of European nations investing in their own defense, stating that while the United States remains committed to NATO, it has obligations around the world that necessitate greater burden sharing from its allies. He has praised Germany for stepping up to provide missiles to Ukraine and has been in discussion with Baltic state leaders, who have commended the president's plan to have NATO allies fund the purchase of American arms for Ukraine. Meanwhile, the Department of Homeland Security, led by Secretary Kristi Noem, has been focused on domestic security implications. Noem, who has a history of taking a hard line on immigration and border security, ordered President Trump's earlier executive orders on refugees from what she terms terrorist-held area. In her new role, she has committed to securing the nation's border against a range of threats and has won praise from Republicans for her experience as a governor. Her focus on domestic security complements the administration's broader foreign policy, which seeks to prioritize American interests while still engaging with global conflicts from a position of strength. The international reaction to this escalating standoff has been mixed. Ukrainian President Volodymyr Zelensky has understandably welcomed the increased pressure on Moscow. He hailed President Trump's shortened deadline as a clear stance and expressed determination that came at a crucial moment. I thank President Trump for his focus on saving lives and stopping this horrible war, Zelensky stated, reaffirming his country's readiness to work with the United States toward a peaceful resolution. European leaders, however, have been more cautious. While many share the desire to see an end to the conflict, there are concerns about the potential economic fallout from a full-blown trade war with Russia. The prospect of secondary tariff, which could penalize European companies doing business with Russia, is a particular point of anxiety. This creates a complex diplomatic landscape for the Trump administration, which must balance its tough rhetoric with the need for allied cooperation. As the deadline approaches, the situation remains tense and unpredictable. The Kremlin's public statement suggests that it is preparing to weather the storm of any new American sanctions, perhaps betting that the economic pain will not be enough to force a strategic retreat in Ukraine. There are signs that Moscow may be looking to strengthen its ties with other nations, like China and India, to offset the impact of American economic pressure. The Russian government has also accused the United States of dragging its feet on the normalization of diplomatic relations, a process that now appears to be completely stalled. Dmitry Peskov recently stated that the process of normalizing relations is going nowhere fast, and that Moscow would like to see a bit more movement from Washington. President Trump's strategy is a high-risk, high-reward proposition. If Moscow capitulates at the last minute and agrees to a ceasefire, he will have secured a major foreign policy victory that aligns with his stated goal of being a peacemaker. However, if Russia continues to defy the ultimatum, the administrations will be forced to either follow through on its threats of severe economic penalties with all the attendant risk of global economic disruption and further escalation, or back down, which would be widely perceived as a sign of weakness. The coming days will be critical in determining not only the future of the conflict in Ukraine, but also the trajectory of the complex and increasingly confrontational relationship between the United States and Russia. The world will watch, hoping for a breakthrough, but preparing for a more turbulent and uncertain future. The silence from Moscow on the specifics of the deadline is deafening. A deliberate act of political theater designed to project an image of unwavering resolve. The Kremlin's calculus appears to be that President Trump's focus on domestic issues and his America First agenda will ultimately limit the extent to which his administration is willing to engage in a protracted and costly economic conflict with Russia. They may also believe that they can leverage their relationship with other major powers to mitigate the impact of any new sanctions. This standoff is not just a test of wills between two powerful leaders. It is a clash of geopolitical vision, a struggle to define the rules of the international order in an increasingly fractured and multipolar world. Many of my listeners, like 70%, have subscribed to my YouTube channel. And so many of you don't even know that you haven't subscribed. And that is actually what makes the show going. It's almost like you're making a donation to the show. So that's why I ask again and again, because it enables us to grow and grow and grow. And we're going for the long haul here. And listen, if this is your first time listening to World Global Conflict, you don't have to subscribe. You guys, your first one's on me. But if you have watched this show before, it's like you are freeloader now. So all I would ask you is, if you have seen this show before and you like it, help me, help my team here. Hit that subscribe and like button now. And we will continue to build this show for you, that I swear. Thank you to all of you guys who have subscribed. It means a lot to me. Thank you so much. That's all for me for today. I will see you soon. Bye for now.